What's going on, my two habit challengers and VIPers? Mike here, and I am going to answer some of the questions that have rolled in around sugar. So clearly that this is a big topic of conversation because, well, this is one of the two main habits that we are focused on fixing over the course of this 21-day challenge. So let's just kind of get into it. A lot of the confusion around sugar is what is natural, what is not, what's okay, what isn't. So I'm going to try to distill this down as best as I can because, well, the challenge with sugar is that there are a lot of gray areas. Okay. And one of those gray areas specifically resides around honey. So the question came up, what about honey? Because there's not a ton of nutritional facts maybe on the honey that you get, especially if you're getting local store-bought honey. There's rarely ever any nutritional facts, but we know that honey is sugar. Now, here's the thing. It is a natural sugar because, well, it comes from honey, or sorry, it comes from bees. But the thing is that we treat it differently than maybe some other natural sugars. So what are some of our other natural sugars? Well, fruit. Fruit is probably the most obvious. Fruit is nothing but sugar. Maybe there's a little bit of protein sprinkled in there every once in a while on a certain piece of fruit, but by and large, it is nearly 100% carbohydrates, nearly 100% sugar. But the thing is that it does not act the same. That sugar does not act the same as does table sugar. Now, another natural occurring sugar is what we find in a lot of dairy foods. So your milks, your cheeses, your cottage cheese, your Greek yogurt, your plain yogurt, all of these also have sugar. In fact, we used Greek yogurt as one of the examples in the intro video into the two habit challenge and showed how oftentimes you'll see on the back of the container, it'll say 6 grams of sugar for Greek yogurt. But it may also say 12 grams of sugar and 6 of them could be added sugar. So you have 6 grams that have been added in. So think table sugar. And then you have the naturally occurring 6 grams. So the naturally occurring type, there's no issue with that. And here's the reason why we don't get concerned about natural sugars, such as what comes from fruit and dairy. It all has to be based around the glycemic index. Basically, the glycemic index is a measure of how carbohydrates affect your blood glucose. So if we go back to my table sugar example, table sugar has the highest rating of about 100. And what that means is that table sugar is just pure glucose. When you consume it, it causes this rapid rise in your blood glucose as well as in your insulin. Now, if we compare that sugar with what comes from, say, an apple still causes a rise in our blood glucose, but it's a much smaller rise. If on that rating scale, it's about a 50. So you're talking the difference between consuming that carbohydrate and causing a spike versus a gradual rise. So there's a huge difference there. And there's a big difference in how that affects your body. It makes a huge difference in terms of how those carbohydrates are being stored in your body. I mean, do they get stored immediately as fat, or do they slowly get released and used as energy over the course of, say, the next hour? So the big thing that we're focused on, and one of the reasons why we're trying to reduce our added sugar, is because typically those are the sugars that have that really high rating and cause that rapid rise. So if we can get that number really, really low by either eliminating sugar completely or at least eliminating or coming close to eliminating those added sugars, well, it's going to make a huge difference in your blood glucose and insulin. And then in turn, it's going to affect your fat storage. Okay. Now, are you with me? You with me so far? So we have our very natural sugars, and then we have what's considered refined sugar or refined carbohydrates. So one is okay, one not so okay. So where does honey fit in? Because it is natural. However, the thing with honey is that the effect on your blood glucose is very similar to that of that table sugar, where it's causing a more rapid rise. So while there are nutritional benefits that are tied to honey, while it is all natural, it still causes that rise. So here is my recommendations around this. If you are keeping all of your sugar in general over the course of the day really low, I mean, we've talked about staying below 25 grams in general. We've talked about clearly staying below 15 grams in terms of added sugar. I would constitute that honey as added sugar. Even though it might be naturally occurring, again, what it's going to do to your body physiologically is the same as the added sugar. So we definitely want to keep that at a low number. Now, for those of you who maybe use honey in your tea and something like that, is it a big deal? Well, if it's 5 grams, right, a tablespoon is going to be about 5 to 10 grams. Well, you got to keep yourself restricted to that 1 tablespoon. But I'm going to add in one more little component to this. And this is going to be a big determinant for many of you. If you're going to have that honey, and let's say you are adding it to your tea, question is, when are you having your tea? You see, this makes a huge difference in terms of what we're trying to do nutritionally. So for those of you who are following our nutrition plan and you are following your time-restricted eating, you know that it's okay to get up in the morning and have your coffee with cream. It's okay to get up and have tea, maybe with a little bit of cream. But what happens when you add honey? Well, the same thing that happens when you add regular table sugar. It breaks the benefit of the fast, because once those carbohydrates enter the body, it causes that rise in insulin, which the whole purpose of remaining in a fasted state is that it's keeping your insulin levels really low. That's why having cream in your coffee is acceptable, because it's fat. Even if there's 1 gram of carbohydrate, it's not sugar. It's, again, naturally occurring carbohydrate or naturally occurring sugar. So it's not causing that rise in your insulin. So we're okay. But if you are waking up and you're having your tea and you're having a tablespoon, maybe multiple tablespoons of honey, just like as if you were adding tablespoons of sugar to your coffee, it's going to cause that rise. And now you somewhat, in a way, defeated the purpose of being in that fasted state, because now you are walking around with elevated insulin levels, maybe elevated blood glucose, which is going to cause you to feel hungry sooner. And then the challenge is, when you do eat, well, guess what? You're already starting with elevated insulin. So that food, once it comes into your body, it's immediately getting shuttled towards fat. Maybe a little bit is being shuttled to your muscles. Maybe a little bit is being shuttled to your liver, but a higher percentage of it is going to be stored as fat. Why? Because your insulin levels are elevated. So this is where we have to really be careful. So hopefully that answered somebody's question around honey and whether or not it's okay. I mean, again, the answer is it's okay within the scheme of keeping below 15 grams a day. It falls into that added sugar category, but where or when you have it makes a difference. All right. So anyway, next we had a question around, well, the natural sugars, which we covered. Sugar alcohol. So this is a good one as well. So sugar alcohol is very interesting. And that's because the whole purpose of sugar alcohol is to add sweetness, very similar to how you would have utilize a sweetener, say stevia. Okay. It's the same concept. It adds a certain level of sweetness to the food that you're eating. However, the benefit of it is that it may not cause that same rapid rise in your blood glucose in your insulin. So typically you will see in, well, let's just see. I just actually happen to have this right here. And this is my 1 bar. And if I look at the back, there's 23 grams of carbohydrates. There's 3 grams of dietary fiber, right? And then total sugars, 1 gram, but includes 0 grams of added sugar. So there's no added sugar in this. But then the next line below that which you will not typically see unless it is a packaged food like this, is sugar alcohol. That's 5 grams. So when we add this up, you have 5 grams of sugar alcohol, you have 1 gram of total sugar. So now we're at 6. You add 3 more, that's 9 of fiber. And then the rest of the carbohydrates are, again, non-sugar carbohydrates. And that means that this bar will not have the same impact on my blood glucose and my insulin as if this were a candy bar, which I hope that most of you realize by now that even if the back of a candy package does not say added sugar, it is as deadly a sugar as you could be consuming, basically. Okay. So I think that much should be pretty obvious to some people. But for those who are taking everything very literally and saying, well, this package of Reese's peanut butter cups doesn't say added sugar, it just says sugar. That's the bad sugar. Okay. Anything that looks like junk, tastes like junk is probably junk. And the sugar in it is the type that is going to affect you in a very, very negative way. So stay away from it. Simple as that. Okay. But back to the sugar alcohol. The sugar alcohol doesn't cause this rapid rise, yet this tastes almost as sweet as a candy bar. And that is likely due to those 5 grams of sugar alcohol. So can you have it? Yes, you can. Does it count towards your added sugar? No, it doesn't. The one thing that I'll make mention of around sugar alcohol is that for many people, it can cause some digestive disruption. So if you typically do not respond well, or your digestive system is very sensitive, this is something, sugar alcohol is something that you want to at least keep to a minimum amount. In fact, it's not something that I would have on a daily basis. In fact, I myself typically don't have it on a daily basis because just for whatever reason, those sugar alcohols really do tend to disrupt some people's gut. So my recommendation, keep it minimal. If you're going to have it, enjoy it, but try not to make it an everyday thing. All right. So that's all I had around sugar. If any of you have any additional questions, please do me a favor, drop them below in this video or drop them in the group. And then this way I can come back on and answer your questions. But just a quick recap, we have our naturally occurring sugars, which come from our dairy and our fruits. All of those are absolutely okay, though we still want to do our best to keep them to 25 grams or less per day. Then anything aside from that is going to be considered an added sugar, including something like honey. Even though it is very clean, even though it is healthy or has health properties to it, it is something that we want to still also minimize our consumption of. And lastly, sugar alcohols, acceptable, but best taken in small dosages. With that said, I hope you guys have an awesome one. I hope you guys are killing it so far and enjoying your 2-habit challenge. And I'm sure in this week, we'll get deeper into protein as well, because I know that is a challenge for many of you, but it's one that you're going to overcome in these next 21 days.